This story doesn't exactly have a name, but it is known by the phrase, "Be as pliant as a reed, not as rigid as a cedar." And it is about a young man named Jacob who has just completed his rabbinical studies, and he is on his way to the next chapter of his life, and he is thrilled to be going on to the next chapter of his life. And what is that chapter? His father, Rabbi Abraham, has just retired. He has been the head rabbi for his community for many, many decades, and it is time for Jacob to take on that job. And so Jacob is leaving rabbinical school and going back to his home city, where he will right away be the head rabbi. That doesn't usually happen. But Jacob is a star student. Everyone in the yeshiva, the rabbinical school, agrees that this young man has a brilliant intellect. He knows the Torah inside and out. He knows the books of prophets inside and out. He knows the books of writings inside and out. He knows Jewish law inside and out. No one can beat him in a debate because he has this amazing memory and can remember all these details from all those holy books. So Jacob is sure he's going to be a great rabbi because he knows all this stuff. And as he is climbing onto his donkey to leave, the head of the yeshiva, Rabbi Isaac, comes out. And Rabbi Isaac gives him a big hug and is so happy to be sending him on his way. And he says, "My student, my son, I'm going to miss you. I want you to remember one thing. You will be a wonderful rabbi if you can remember to be as pliant and gentle as a reed, not as stiff and rigid as a cedar." And Jacob says, "Thank you, thank you. Oh, thank you for all of your wisdom that you have shared with me. Thank you for the years that you have taught me. Thank you for all of the learning that I have received in this yeshiva. Thank you so much for everything." And they part ways. Jacob hops onto his donkey and rides off to his home city. And as he goes, he's kind of thinking to himself, I don't understand how that phrase has anything to do with being a rabbi. I mean, being a rabbi is about knowing our sources, knowing our holy books. That's what being a rabbi is about. I don't understand. What is the point of be as pliant as a reed, not as rigid as a cedar? I don't get it. And as he's riding along, he's thinking to himself about the parts of the Torah that he loves the most and can't wait to share his learning with the people in his home city. And as he gets closer, he sees something walking ahead of him on the road, and he can't tell if it's a person or an animal. It's all hunched over, whatever it is. And as he gets closer, he realizes, no, it is a person, but it's a person who's all bent over, and it looks like their feet kind of turn in, and they're hobbling along, and they've got a cane. And as Jacob gets even a little closer, he realizes that the person is kind of bent and twisted, and as though they have worked many, many hard, long years. And as Jacob comes up next to this person, the old man turns his head to him and he says, "Good day, young man." And Jacob, "Oh my! Is everyone from your city as ugly and feeble and gnarled and old as you are?" Jacob blurts out this question. And the old man just looks at him calmly and says, "I don't know. You'll have to ask that question of my Creator, the one who made me in their image and likeness." And suddenly, Jacob realizes what it is that he has said and what it is that he has done, that he has judged this old man because he was old, because he looked the way he looked. Jacob throws himself off of his donkey, and he throws himself at the old man's feet. And he says, "Oh, please forgive me. I am so sorry. I am so embarrassed. I have hurt you. I have embarrassed you. I have humiliated you. I feel horrible. Please forgive me." And the old man simply says, you can ask forgiveness of that same Creator that can answer your questions about whether everyone who is old like me is ugly and feeble and gnarled like me. And Jacob, but please forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. And he's crawling along at the old man's feet as the old man continues to hobble along with his crooked old gait. And the old man simply repeats, you can ask forgiveness of the Creator. And Jacob says, I know, it's my Creator too. I know, that's why I've realized. And as they get closer to the city, Jacob doesn't realize, but everyone in the city has prepared a welcome home festival for him. And they have an orchestra, there's dancers, and there's singers, and there's food, and there's flowers, and they're all getting ready to leave the city gates and to bring Jacob back in a great grand parade. And they open the city gates, and they come out, and they see this odd sight with this young man who must be Jacob, crawling along on the ground next to this old man, and Jacob is clearly asking something of the old man, and the old man is simply walking along. And as the people get closer, they say, what's going on? And Jacob says, I did something horrible. I judged this man because he was old, and I insulted him, and I embarrassed him, and I humiliated him, and I'm asking him for forgiveness, and he won't forgive me. And the people all turned to the old man, and they said, please forgive him. He's young. He will learn. He probably didn't understand what he did. Please forgive him. And the old man stops and says, well, I suppose I can forgive him if he learns to be as pliant and gentle as a reed, not as stiff and rigid as a cedar. And Jacob's mouth drops open. How did this old man know that this was exactly what his head Rabbi Isaac had told him? How did this old man know? But he said, thank you for forgiving me. And the whole crowd of people wrapped Jacob in their midst and danced him into the city, into this welcome home festival. And Jacob kept kind of looking around to see if the old man was part of the festival, but he couldn't see him, and then he let himself be swept up in the festivities. And when it was all over, he turned to his father, Rabbi Abraham, and he said, who was that old man? I didn't recognize him as anyone who lived in our city. And his father also shook his head, and he said, yeah, I don't know who he was either. Maybe he was coming to visit someone. And so Jacob went out and knocked on doors and asked around, and no one knew who that old man was. And then Jacob kind of stopped in the middle of the street in the early evening, and he thought to himself, that must have been Elijah the prophet. See, in Jewish mythology, Elijah the prophet, the one from the Old Testament, Elijah the prophet comes in exactly the disguise that we need to learn something, usually disguised as something that we are having a problem with. And Jacob had a problem with growing old. Jacob was afraid of growing old. Jacob thought that when you got old, you got feeble and you lose your intellect, which was Jacob's prize. But of course, Jacob realized from that encounter that intellect wasn't everything. What was everything was learning to be as pliant and gentle as a reed, not as stiff and rigid as a cedar. And of course, Jacob had heard that from two very wise old men. So in that moment, Jacob thanked Elijah the prophet for having brought him that lesson. And Jacob did indeed learn his lesson. In fact, the first sermon that he gave from his new pulpit as the new rabbi was to teach about that part of the Bible that says, treat others the way you would wish to be treated, and love thy neighbor as thyself. And of course he added to that, be as pliant and gentle as a reed, not rigid and stiff like a cedar.